Jesus who died shall be sad.
Welcome back. We're just going to continue very quickly here. We touched upon Dr. Kostiw. This is his home that we're sitting in, and Terry's shared quite a bit about things that happened in the hospital, things that happened with strangers coming to the door. Talked about briefly about where he found the time, or where he had that time to do a lot of his writing, and we'll end our interview in a few minutes just next door, in the room next door, where there's a nice window, and Terry can tell us about that as well. I'm just going to ask, for those that might know Terry from years past in the Toronto Church, many years have passed for some, and if you're watching this, just an opportunity where God's laid it on my heart to bring people up to speed and say, Terry, basically, what have you done with your life over the last, not to answer it in 2 minutes, but 20, 30 years? My memories were this. I grew up, I'm a few years behind you, and your mother died in 1982.
Correct.
And you would have been 24. I was 22. I remember that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I know at that time, almost all of you, the couples were leaving the church, because I started with the youth, and I'm going to just fill you in there. I started with the youth in 1984. God brought me back. I was up at OCELA. There's 150 Ukrainian Baptist youth there from all over the States, and something happened. Leadership didn't show up, and there's seminars to be done and activities, and I got baptized, throwing myself in there, and because they saw my activity, they put me on the committee. And that's what happens when you show up. You get in trouble because now any warm body will do.
Hear it.
Absolutely. So 3 years later, 3 years later, I become president of the All Ukrainian Evangelical Baptist Youth, and there's a long stretch there. And just a couple of weeks ago, I've celebrated 25 years of going up to OCELA every July and just giving back to our youth. But that's 1984. And in 1984, all of our couples are gone. Your sister and Ron, 3 couples got married in 1980. Mike and Rita Machnik, and I was in Mike's wedding party. Harry and Donna Nadech, who I heard met in Winnipeg at our youth congress in '76.
So that sure paid off.
It paid off a lot, and that's part of my research. A lot of people were connected. Andy and Linda Tesluch got married in September. So in 1980, all these couples are getting married. The problem is, all 3 of them basically are non-Ukrainian partners. And there is, some other time, there was no place for people marrying in our Ukrainian church, everything in Ukrainian, and the spouses are English. And from 1980 to 82, 83, they all kind of left one after another. And so 1984 comes along. I remember this specifically. There's no one left in the church, just me and the youth. So if I go back during that time, working at the bakery, 1972 to 79, I also, I see the 4 of you, you got schooling, you're moving away. There's Natalka, Alex, yourself, and Oksana. Oksana was mainly the last one of the kids up until 1980. It was 74 to 80, she gave him a trophy. But Oksana, last couple kind of left. Prior to then, all of you are involved in school. Your mother dies in 82.
Correct.
And I guess those years are the years where almost everything in the church, your mother died, big part of the front, a lot of the organizing.
Young people's work and contributed a lot with young people. She loved kids, she loved young people. And we spent a lot of time, you mentioned Ocelia as a young kid, a teenager. I spent a lot of time there with my wife as well. We had one.
The brown canoe?
The brown canoe we still have. But since then I think we've acquired about 8 more canoes and kayaks. And interestingly enough, my sisters now have cottages not too far from Pigeon Lake. Yet we haven't been back there in a long time. So you caused me to reflect very quickly in my mind on those Pigeon Lake days. That was a chapter long ago.
I'm just thinking right now, you weren't at the church, but a lot of connections over these years. You were up at OCELA, so on weekends
you were up at OCELA.
You were either getting married or were married. So the brown canoe, I shared with Walter. Do you remember Peter Kutsenko at all?
Peter Kutsenko was a dear friend of mine, and we socialized together. And he obviously died way too young, and I think of him often. Especially when I see Sarah, I look in her eyes, we're both thinking the same thing. I used to spend time at the Kosankos for lunch. They used to be very gracious hosts, invite me over for lunch. So Peter and I had some really good times together. Peter Kosanko at the OCELA, and sadly he was taken away too young.
We did a whole tribute to him with Walter in the Toronto church. We actually went on for about a half an hour because your dad officiated the funeral. Walter, he shared at your dad's funeral. That was the first funeral he did, riding in the car. And I shared this with Walter, and I think you might have been up at OCELA at the peak, at the beach.
Yeah.
A lot of young people, and you might have been there that week, and that's where I remember the brown canoe. You were up quite a bit. Peter went out in an aluminum fishing boat.
That's right. Yes.
Little motor.
9.9 motor. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm probably, if he died in 1977, I'm 15, 16, 17 years old. And we had all of our youth up there. OCELA was just bought 5 years.
Yeah.
Tons of youth. And it wasn't OCELA weekend. OCELA didn't start until 1981. When I use OCELA, I mean the youth conferences, but it's the name of the location.
Right. Yeah.
So all the youth are up there all summer long, 72 to
great times,
81.
Yeah. Playing volleyball on the beach.
On the front part where it's all grown over.
The campfires, it was a wonderful atmosphere. Those were really good years.
Yes. Where did you stay? You had a lot up at the top.
We had a lot at the top. We had a trailer. My parents spent a lot of money in the trailer. And
was that one of those that opened up? Was it a full?
It was a full. It opened up, but it was a full one. It was kind of half camper tent trailer and half solid state trailer. So, in fact, I still have pictures of that. I show those pictures to my kids, to my son in particular. I say, you guys are lucky you have my sister's cottage. This is what I used to live in. But they were wonderful memories because every weekend, for several years, Chris and I and my mom would pick up. She loved it up there. She loved the OCELA. She loved the people. She was an extremely social person. My dad preferred his books here, but those were really, really good times, good memories, and there were young people everywhere. Yeah.
You're a lot. You come around the corner, Prokopiak's on the left, you go up to the well. I always had to get water.
That's right.
First slot on the right, but your driveway's back this way with a little garbage wooden disposal double door or whatever. I will always remember that. So was your trailer way? I never saw it.
It was way up at the top.
Okay.
Way up at the top. It was actually in the fall. It was overlooking the Prokopiak's cottage. Looking down. But when the foliage was in, the trees were in full bloom. You couldn't see down. So it was a great little spot. With one minor problem, it was riddled with poison ivy. So there came a point where I think I became immune to poison ivy. I used to get poison ivy so many times. There was poison ivy everywhere. On the Ostapchuk's lot as well.
Very close there. Were they next door?
They were next door. They owned two lots. They put their cottage in one lot, and the cottage, the lot that they had next to us remained vacant. So, yeah.
The memory I had there, and then some other day OCELA, I'm doing a history on OCELA, all the original owners, not today, but as you touched on that, I never forgot Peter Kutsenko getting out, and he was a type of showman, very cool. He had that brown leather jacket, the long hair, but he loved being a comedian. Remember his stories, whatever. But he went out in the middle of the lake, and he got in that aluminum fishing boat, and he started from one corner to another, and all of a sudden this boat, and you said it was a 9.9
or 7.9.
So it could actually pick up speed.
Yeah, sure.
So he started coming across, and he turned it on, and the boat starts picking up speed. But what he did, I've never forgotten, is he started rowing.
And while he was...
Yeah, and it looked like he was rowing the boat.
Superman.
Yes, and we're all looking out there, and I think he's done this several times, but this boat picked up speed, and he's going faster and faster, and you would think that he's rowing this boat across the lake.
An Olympian. Oh, that's funny.
That was incredible to me. Share very quickly, and when you grew up in the church, from what you remember, who were the guys in your age bracket? You were talking about Peter Kutsenko. Everyone was a couple of years. Zubilevich, Chordas. Who grew up with you in your age? The guys. Who do you remember very, very quickly?
Well, we spent time together as a group growing up for the first, I guess, 7-8 years. So the group would have consisted of Peter Kutsenko, Andy Zubilevich, who coincidentally I've seen recently a few times. It was nice to.
He lives down the road here at his parents' 297 Sunnyside. I was just there last Saturday.
Okay.
Lives in the basement, so yeah, he's at the cottage now. But if you're ever driving by, tell him Peter sent them.
Okay, I will. Yeah, for sure. So it was fun to reconnect with him. I met with them purely coincidentally a few years ago at a restaurant. We were driving up. I was driving up to my sister's cottages, and he was driving up to Pigeon Lake. And I had all my nephews in the car. He had a whole bunch of kids in the car, and we met at McDonald's purely by coincidence. We looked at each other, and I guess said to each other, "I think I know you. I think I know you." And so we made the connection. But so Andy and I chummed around. With Peter and Peter Ostapchuk, of course, was
yes, same age,
and so we had a lot of good fun. We, in fact, visited. My father and I visited churches all over Ontario, and through the churches that we often visited together, my father was doing the preaching, and I chauffeuring, or even before I was chauffeuring, I just was the. I guess my father's companion, driving companion. But anyway, it was interesting in that I think it sort of gave me an opportunity to meet with other people who became friends at the time. And I'm thinking of Terry Vascu,
yes.
who
Hamilton.
I just saw recently, because we were at that church a lot. And the Vascus were always very gracious. We would go over for lunch, and you know, Peter and I would do the things, or sorry, Terry and I would do the things that kids that age do, and I won't disclose the details. You might want to ask him on tape, but it had to do with my dad's Rambler as a hint.
And that was the blue one?
That was the blue one, yeah. And then, you know, we visited the Oshawa church where my dad was visiting minister, and so I have really good memories with Bobby Slobodian. I haven't talked to him in a long time, or seen him in a long time. And of course, we would all get together, I guess, as a pack at Pigeon Lake.
Yes, I remember.
So those are the.
I wasn't part of that group. You were a couple of years older, and I never.
Older.
It was a different group.
It was a different group. We had good fun with Dan Shawerda as well. He was always a fun guy to be around.
Yes.
So that you know, I named a few names. There were obviously others, but it was there were a lot of fun days for sure. But since having left Toronto at a fairly young age to attend school at 18, and having spent 6-7 years in Ottawa, we sort of lost touch. And I suppose that they went their separate ways as well. I don't know. So we never really kept any kind of a close connection. But those were my recollections of my early days at the church. And after we moved to Ottawa, where both Chris and I studied for quite a long time, we then moved to Oakville, and have been in Oakville for almost 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let me just tighten up those dates here. I hope to give you a gift as well. Everyone that I interview, it's they learn about you and you learn about them, but a lot of those guys that you mentioned, I hope to interview as well.
Okay.
And someday you'll be able to catch up exactly. So thank you for just opening your life a bit here. It's a bit different. I know you wanted to spend more on your dad, and that's okay. I'm always interested in the kids of the pastors as well and what they've done. But I have your dad's book here, and I never saw your face in here, but if you can, that looks like Peter Kutsenko. I don't know how your eyes are, but
For sure.
there's Steve Ostapchuk, Andy Zubalevich, Danny Zubalevich.
Yeah.
Can you, Mark Osborne, can you pick out somehow, there's one of the big Chihuahua boys, I think. You might have to need your glasses.
I feel
Helpless without the
helpless without my glasses would be a way.
I'm going to pick them up. We'll do that. I'll see when we break there again.
When we
But
break, I'll have a look at them.
yeah, there's a lot. I'm trying to identify it because I can recognize all the faces, and I know you got to be in there somewhere. But you know what happened? There's my sister Sue.
Oh yes.
If someone was sick, and this is what I'm thinking, if someone was sick, they missed that photo opportunity, and yet they were a big part of the group photo. And as I was going through the pictures there, that's part of the problems we're having as well, identifying them all.
Sure.
Quickly there, you went to Ottawa, and just to catch up, what year did you go to Ottawa? You said 6 years. Everyone thinks about 4 years in school, but what year would you have finished? You went to Humberside?
I went to Humberside Collegiate, graduated in 76, grade 13, then moved on to university.
Carleton?
Went to Carleton University. I studied law, undergraduate law and criminology at Carleton.
What made you do that? What caused you? Your dad has 2 doctorates, right?
Correct, yeah.
Was there any influence there from your father on where to go to school, what you should be doing with your life?
There was a lot of influence, both direct and indirect. I guess the most important piece of influence was that you must continue your education. And my father was very adamant about that in his own kind and gentle way, which sounds like a contradiction in terms, but we sort of all accepted in the family that you move on. You need an education. In fact, my dad obviously very much valued the letters behind people's names, and even refers to my sister, who has a doctorate in law, as Dr. Lasha, and even in his, it was so important to him that even in his final days, he said, "It's really important for you, Taras, to finish that doctorate." And
can I just share? Natalka, after the funeral, said she's working on her master's in education,
right, yeah.
and she said she wished she would have finished it for your
Yes,
dad. And what
for
you're
sure.
saying,
Yeah.
you must continue.
Yes,
So just the whole thing of everyone in your family, academics was a big part. So the whole push was
academics for in the latter. Oksana grew up in an era where especially being a woman in that era, somehow it wasn't quite as
important, or the expectation.
But she accomplished a lot. She became a nurse at a very young age.
She said she's six years in Winton. I said, "Were you slow?" She said, "No," because the program was like.
It's a long program. It would be the equivalent probably of a master's in science and nursing.
Back then, yes.
So she studied very hard. Lasha, a profound academic. Lasha has, I don't know if you've interviewed her yet, but she has many degrees, many degrees.
Last
she put herself
Master of Art, was it when she was coming through again? Master of Arts?
She has a Bachelor of Arts degree, a Master of Arts degree.
And that's where I left off.
She has she did a law degree at Dalhousie.
Okay, remember her going up to the East Coast?
She also has a doctorate of jurisprudence from Chicago Law School. So she spent many years in school and is an accomplished lawyer. In Natalka's case, she's an educator. So we've all sort of had that instilled in us. And my father didn't get out of the house very much, but I can tell you that when I graduated with a master's degree in criminology, his only wish was to attend my convocation, which we did together back in in the early 80s when I graduated with a master's degree, and he was so proud. And it was we have actually wonderful pictures that I found. Of,
and this was in Ottawa.
This was in Ottawa.
He drove.
We probably drove together to Ottawa, or we flew to Ottawa. I can't remember the details, but it was a proud moment, and he didn't want to miss any kids' graduations, and that's one part of our life that he really insisted on participating in. When Lasha graduated from law school in Chicago, he went to Chicago for this would have been her 4th degree, so after a while I guess the novelty should wear off, but it never did for my father. He attended the graduations very happily, and it was a really big event for him. So
6 years in Ottawa. Did you want to be a lawyer, or when you were saying the courses that you took, it was criminal? That's all I remember back.
I studied.
I'm catching up over 30 years here. Criminal law, or
it was a very unique course that I took at Carleton. In fact, it was the only program in Canada at the time where they offered a Bachelor of Arts as opposed to a Bachelor of Law, a Bachelor of Arts in Law. And that's what I did, with the view that maybe I would pursue law, or I wasn't sure at the time. And when you asked, where was your dad's influence? Well, it was always there. Not only the education piece, but he was really interested in constitutional law in particular. He has a degree, a law degree, and it's not so much a trial lawyer or law degree, but his focus when he was studying law was on constitutional matters, constitutional law. And as a matter of fact, the house is full of constitutional documents from other churches.
And he wrote a book on Ukrainian 1917-1919 Constitution.
That's right, constitutional acts.
That was one of his specialties,
one of his specialties. He also wrote, as you're probably aware, in 1960, he single-handedly put together the Constitution of the Ukrainian Evangelical Baptist Church, and to this day it remains, I think, in force. So that was a big feat. But it must have had some kind of influence on me. To what extent, I don't know. But it was, Ottawa was a great place to be. I enjoyed studying there. And then I had a few options after my undergraduate degree to pursue law or pursue graduate studies. And I was lucky, I was accepted into the master's program at the University of Ottawa. And I chose
It was Carleton first?
It was Carleton first, and then I went to the University of Ottawa. And I must confess that part of that decision-making process was influenced by my wife, who was accepted at University of Ottawa Teachers College. So, and by then I believe we were married. So,
you know that Dr. Nick Britch taught at the University of Ottawa, I believe?
That's right.
Slavic Studies.
Mykola Britch. And Mykola Britch was a very good friend of my father-in-law's, interestingly enough, because my father-in-law studied with Mykola Britch. They were completing their PhDs together at the University of Ottawa. So that was an interesting connection, family, church, academic connection. And I remember visiting with him, with my father-in-law several times while I lived in Ottawa, because he was finishing his PhD at the time. And I saw Mykola Britch there, and I met his very good friend, who I no longer haven't had contact with for a long time.
Rick.
But Rick Yaroslav, Pastor Pinchuk, and I were the best of squash buddies in Ottawa. He was studying at the time at the University of Ottawa. He was studying Slavic languages, and I think I still was at Carleton, but we would have bi-weekly squash games together, because he loved to play squash at the time, as did I, and he used to beat me most of the time at squash. He was a very great racquetball.
Now Rick was single. That they were both bachelors, or
they were both bachelors at the time, and
old bachelors.
They were both bachelors. Old bachelors, maybe. I'm not going to say old.
They were getting up, and
they were both bachelors. But Rick eventually
married.
Rick was younger than Mykola Britch, and Rick eventually married, and he sent some cards, pictures of his kids. I believe he's somewhere in the Niagara region.
I think he started a church in St. Catharines around the bend there. Yes.
But we never stayed in much contact at all. And And then when I left Ottawa, we moved to Oakville, and I started my career with the government, with the then Ministry of Correctional Services, and I did performed a variety of duties with the Ministry of Correctional Services, including starting out as a probation parole officer. So those were my sort of beginnings in terms of my next career. I had an academic background in criminology and criminal law, and I did some practicing as a probation officer, worked at a jail at Maplehurst Correctional Center and a few other facilities. And then the college approached me and asked me if I would, in those days very few people had graduate degrees and in criminology. There are obviously many graduate degrees, but in criminology not very many people had the post-secondary, so the college called me and said, would you come to the college to teach?
And tell the audience what school and
This
where.
is Sheridan College in
Oakville
and in Brampton. We have two campuses. So Sheridan College asked me to come to teach, and of course I had no background teaching at all. I said, well, I'll do this for one semester, but I'm very busy and I'm very happy working for the Ministry of Correctional Services. They were very good to me, and I enjoyed what I was doing. So I said, I'll come for one semester. Well, Peter, 23 years later, I'm still there.
That was the next question of catching up. How you 23 years.
23 years later, I'm still at Sheridan College.
Now, did you start on contract or did you move on to how?
I started on contract. My first job basically was for one semester, and that's all that I really wanted. That's all that I was interested in, because I had a great career going with the ministry, and I wanted to finish my schooling too. I still, I wanted to complete that step, and starting a new career requires more attention to your new job and so on. But I started out on contract, and within a year of being on what we call a sessional, because I took a leave from the government to teach, the government was kind enough to release me to teach, and I could hang on to my job. So, but within a year they offered me full-time employment, and it was an offer that I could not refuse. I learned that in that year on contract that this is a pretty good job. I really enjoy doing this. I enjoy teaching, I enjoy young people. So
you were quite young. If you've been doing that for 23 years and you're what, 51, or you would have started at 27, 28?
I started part-time at the college at 28, and I spent
without a master's in education or a PhD?
None of that.
So they needed someone to actually, was that a new area or is that?
At the time, we had several programs related to justice. Eventually we amalgamated all those programs, and we ended up with a Justice Department at Sheridan, and there have been changes since then. But at the time, back in the mid-80s, we had a Police Foundations program, we had a Law and Security program, we had a Corrections program, and with my background in corrections, in the jails, and as probation parole officer for 6 years, they felt that I would be...
You're in the trenches, you're not teaching theory,
But I really enjoyed it. We had a really good time. It was... at the time, there was less pressure on the financial side, and there seemed to be it was an environment where you had a lot of freedom in every way, and I was able to do other things while I was teaching, and it was a wonderful career in that I was able to be with my kids during the summer. So. It's been great. I can't.
And that's why you have this luxury today of sitting here and not being. Well,
this is true. This is true.
Having the time. If it would have been any other time during the year, I'm sure it would have been a lot more difficult if your dad died during the school year. You just don't have the time to do what you're doing the last couple of months.
Dad did me a favor in that respect. So.